Hi, everyone. I was just having a little dance to that music. I don't know if it was just me or not.
No, me too. I was thinking the thing would stop and we'd all be dancing to the music.
Yeah. I was like, stop when it's 5 seconds, Helen. Okay. So huge welcome to you all today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to episode 2 of our coffee club. I say that tentatively because technically it's episode 3, and we have Dalia to thank for that, for naming our first episode 0, and thus confusing me for eternity. So today we're going to be talking about staying ahead of the curve, specifically the why, the what, and the how. And we've got caffeine. Well, I've got my nice cup of tea here, and hopefully my team have their various beverages available. Hopefully you do as well. So we've got lots of concrete examples, lots of stories. Some of them have happy endings. But I really wanted to quiz the team today myself, because I've been skilling up on Java for the past year, not just 1 year of Miss Java, but about 20 years of Miss Java. So I've been using a huge range of resources to do that, including, but not limited to, shameless plug, JetBrains Academy, loads of videos, blogs, code katas, just a huge range of resources from the wonderful community, and that's served me really well. So of course, as we all know, as we are all very aware of, especially right now, Java is released twice a year now, and that can be quite scary. At least it was for me. Trisha, I'm going to jump straight to you because I know you have some thoughts on that one that you wanted to specifically talk to about. So I'm going to give you an in there.
Right, I had an opinion on something.
I know, right?
Yes. So I do know that some people are a little bit intimidated by the rate of change in Java at the moment, because we are getting 2 releases a year. It does feel like a lot, especially given I think it was from Java 6 to Java 7. There was like 6 years or something between those 2 releases. And then there was like 2-3 years between sort of like 7 and 8 and 8 and 9. I can't really remember, but about 3 years. So it feels quite intimidating to move from sort of, I have several years to get up to speed on the next version, versus I only just figured out what was in the last version, and now it's 6 months later and I've got a new one. But one of the things I really wanted to say about this is that it's not like you're getting one of these huge releases every 6 months. Like Java 8 was a huge release. We had lambdas and streams. We had new methods on various different collections, frameworks that weren't just streams. So, for example, map has a load of new methods on it. We had optional. We had loads of things come into 8, and it wasn't just new APIs. It was like completely new ways of doing stuff. And it probably took us about 3 years to get to grips with like, what's 8 doing and how can I make the most of it? And then along comes 9, we've got modules, and we've got, some other changes in 9, the helper methods for collections. So we took almost 3 years to sort of get up to skill with the most recent version of Java. But when it's coming out every 6 months, we just have maybe 1 or 2 features to get up to speed with. So I actually think that the updated cadence can be a bit of a blessing, because we can do very small diffs between the last version and the current version and sort of stay up to date. So that's a long-winded way of saying don't panic. It's the same amount of features are being released over the same period of time, taken at a higher level. And you can kind of dive in and either learn it in big chunks every 3 years if you want to, or just take a small diff and learn it every 6 months, because then you only have to learn 1 or 2 new things. So don't panic.
I think I love the don't panic message, because it is easy to kind of get in a bit of a spin about that at times, I think. And I think it is also really easy to forget that we do have a choice. This learning is not necessarily foisted upon us, unless your name's Mala creating this wonderful new content that I'm going to talk about, or rather Mala's going to talk about. But yeah, it's very easy, I think. And that's a really good point as well, because something that we discussed as a team when we realized we wanted to talk about this topic was staying ahead of the curve can be quite fear-driven. A lot of us worry that we're already behind, or we've taken some time out, or that we'll never catch up. And we get this FOMO, we get this fear of missing out. So we're going to talk about some practical approaches as well. So I mentioned that we were going to use a framework, this, why, what, and how. However, it would be really awesome if we could get the community to participate as well. So for each section, I'm going to try my best to say we're going to start with the why section, and please do put your thoughts in the chat, because it'd be really great to get some interaction there. So the question that I have, both for myself and for my amazing team here, is why do you need to stay ahead of the curve? What does that look like? Do you even need to do that? Because I think there's a lot of talk about staying ahead of the curve, and we must do that. And sometimes it's really useful to take a step back and go, okay, but why? So that is my first question. If you have any thoughts, please do drop them in the chat, which is over on that monitor that you're going to see me looking at periodically. Dalia, do you want to kick us off with that one, please?
Yeah, sure. And I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a cold. But on the why question, I think that's the most important question to ask yourself before you dive into any new technology or whatever new framework is, why are you doing it? And I think the answer varies based on your approaches or your goals or whatever it is. Some of the whys could be that maybe you want to know everything about the latest technologies, new features, all those things, so you can better or more effectively solve your problems. So maybe like right now you're just about to write a new object, and you got tired of writing all your setters and getters or generating them or whatever. If you're staying ahead of the curve, you'd have heard about records, for example, and that would enable you to solve a problem in a better way because you have stayed ahead of the curve. That's a small example, but I've also noticed as our careers have progressed and you've gone beyond being just, taking assignments and doing it, is as you are in charge of solving problems, it becomes more and more important to be aware of the solutions out there that are coming out. So, when we start talking about Docker, Kubernetes, all that stuff, even though maybe your company or institution is not using Docker at the moment, it would be good to understand what problem Docker is solving, how it's solving it, all those different things. Another really good reason to do it is because you want to keep your skills up to date and stay marketable as far as being employable, because sometimes the company is using a specific set of technologies, but you don't want to get stuck with just that. You want to be learning the new technology or anything outside of the technology that the company has chosen, so that when you're ready to progress your career, that you're up to date at that point. Or you might just be interested in staying ahead of the curve. I know some people love knowing all about the new features and new technologies, trying them out and all that stuff. And that's another really good reason. So there's a lot of whys, and I'd be very interested in knowing, like, if you're interested in staying ahead of the curve, why are you interested in staying ahead of the curve? For me, I've been asking myself before I dive into any new technology of, do I need to do this? Why do I want to do it? For example, when I dove into Docker, it was because I saw the value add that Docker presents, and I really wanted to learn more about it. And that's when I dove in. I wasn't, I didn't just say, oh, everyone's talking about Docker, I want to learn about Docker. It's more of like, listen, am I into these problems? Do I see a value in this technology? If yes, then I dive into it. And sometimes it's a no. And I just don't do it. So that's kind of my perspective there.
Thanks, Dalia. I love that point of view. And you were talking about your Docker videos, and obviously you wanted to learn more, and to use your words, you dove in and you learned an insane amount, and then you created us all some awesome videos, which is super helpful. So yeah, there was an interesting comment in the chat actually about, I'm reading this as, you don't necessarily need to dive into everything. You can stay ahead of the curve with a fairly light touch as well. It doesn't need to be a focus on a particular technology. It can be a more broad perspective. So I think that's a really good point as well.
I wanted to follow up a little bit on that. So I hope we get a chance to talk about that a little bit in the how section at the end. I do have a whole talk on that. But yeah, I think it's really important to understand, like, how deep to go, how much work should we do. So I think we'll follow up on the light touch versus the deep dive when we talk about how to stay up to date.
100%. Yeah, good show. Remind me when I forget. Mala, what are your thoughts on why you should stay ahead of the curve?
So I absolutely agree with what all of you have mentioned about the reasons why we should be staying ahead of the curve. I want to touch upon probably the question, what triggers this whole phenomena of, oh my God, I'm behind. Probably people could be seeing a buzz around an event or a major release. Probably some articles, videos which say it's 5 frameworks every backend developer is using today. Or when your colleagues ask about you a newer technology you're not aware of. Or when people from unrelated domains seek advice, what is the best cryptocurrency to invest in right now? So there are a lot of things. And of course, when people are talking about things, they are not lying. The only thing is that whatever they're talking about, what seems to be awesome and working for them might not work for you. So you need to, apart from asking you the why questions, you also need to think about why not, or should I defer it, or should I do it right now? So probably asking questions like why I don't need to be ahead of the time. No, not the time, the curve right now, because we all have limited time and energy. So probably the questions that we need to be asking before taking the plunge is, what is the value that it brings? And what is it that I would lose if I'm not ahead of the curve?
I agree with that completely. And I think that's I think that's already been mentioned, the whole idea of the fear of missing out, the fear of all these things that I'm not doing. That's not a great driver. It's much better to identify what can I do with this? Do I really care about cryptocurrencies? Like, I'm not doing anything with that right now. And so it's there is so much stuff out there, so many technologies out there, so many things to do that, of course, it's overwhelming. And one of the things that I found quite gave me a bit of a sense of relief is when I realized it is physically impossible to stay up to date on everything. And once you embrace the fact that it's not possible, then you realize you're not failing. You can't possibly stay up to date on everything. You must be selective. You must decide what's important for you. And I kind of came up with my own sort of mini framework on the why, which is there are 3 main reasons why you want to learn a new technology. 1 is to solve a specific business problem. 1 is to solve a specific team problem. For example, I always use the example of releases. Releases are quite often painful. The business doesn't necessarily prioritize it, but the team feels that pain. So you can find some technology to fix that team pain. And the 3rd one, which is the one we often end up focusing on first, is doing it for ourselves. And I think that's the thing that we've been touching on here, like in terms of growing our career or feeling better about where we are in terms of our knowledge, or being able to bring something to the team in terms of, I know about Docker, like, let me help you. So I think it's important to differentiate those 3 main reasons as to why you might want to learn something new, because then you're going to learn, you're going to pick different things to learn, and you're going to pick different ways to apply that learning.
Yeah, thanks, Trish. That's definitely true. I'm just wondering, has anybody, we've talked about frameworks and some of the reasons for why we might want to do something, but has anybody learned something with the belief that they needed to be ahead of the curve and actually it wasn't that useful at the end of the day?
Me, I have a story about that.
I think we all have stories, just not all willing to share.
Once upon a time, I went to university a long time ago, and I learned Java. I learned Java 1.1. Then I did my summer internship in industry, and they were trying out Java 1.2. This is in 1999, I think, no, 1998. It's a while ago. And 1.2 was like new and shiny. This is an enterprise going, let's see what's new in 1.2. One of the things that was new in 1.2 is they were replacing the AWT UI framework with the Swing UI framework. So I kind of saw a little bit with this with my internship. And then throughout my 3rd year at university, I was like, right, I'm clearly behind the curve on this UI framework, because at university we're learning AWT. Now I need to learn Swing, because otherwise I will be unemployable when I come out of university. So I spent like 9 months learning Swing. I implemented something for my poor dad, who's a careers teacher. I implemented like a library system for him in Swing, which I'd already done in Pascal like 3 years ago. But I'm like, right, I'm going to rewrite this in Swing so I can learn Swing. By the way, that's another why. Why? Does the business need this? No, Trisha needs to learn Swing. So we're going to do it in Swing. Re-implement it in Swing, spent quite a lot of time on it. And gave it to my poor dad. And at the end of it, I graduated, and JSPs and servlets were the big thing. And like, I never used Swing in 20 years of professional development. There was no need to get panicky about learning one thing. After that, I was like, I will only learn something if I see a job I want that needs that skill, or if the job I'm using requires that skill.
Great. And I guess that's why you developed your own framework, to make sure you didn't fall into that trap again. So good advice. Thank you. Some great advice in the chat as well. Working smarter versus working harder, which is, I think everybody on this call definitely aspires to. We don't always succeed, but we definitely aspire to it. So Hamza, we are definitely going to talk about the how, because that is a great question. How can someone get a real world experience with the latest technologies I'm learning now? We are definitely going to talk to that. I'm going to briefly talk about the what's and where, but the majority of the time we're going to talk about the how, because that's probably what's most interesting. What and where are kind of merged as a question. So what might you need to stay ahead on the curve on? Because we've talked about technology, we've talked about people, process, all the rest of it, but do you have any specific thoughts on what we might need to stay ahead of the curve on? And I shall start with Trisha.
I think, so this is sort of a trick question, isn't it? Because what do you need to stay up to date on? The initial instinct is like everything. Because we need to stay up to date with Java, but not just core Java, all the Java frameworks, not just the Java framework that you're learning, but the other ones you're not learning, to stay up to date on modern techniques for perhaps automated testing. And then, of course, expanding out from that, because the automated testing starts at like unit level testing, which is a bit like just same as any old core Java. Then you think about integration testing, then you think about continuous integration. And of course, Docker plays into that story. You're talking about deployments, you're talking about DevOps, you're talking about systems, you're talking about like monitoring and availability. And then, of course, on top of all of that is the ever-present people problem. Like, we have to work together. We need to increase and improve our communication skills. We need to be able to talk to the business to find out what they want so that I can find the right technologies to fix their problems. So how can I also level up communication skills, or are there other processes I could be using to make us work more efficiently? I mean, in this team alone, we keep talking about the planning process and how can we work more efficiently? Are there other things which other people have done to solve my problems? So the what, this is when I realized that this is impossible. The what is huge. It is everything. It's not just staying up to date with the what's new in Java 17. It's literally everything that could possibly touch our day job, which is why I really do think that when we start looking at the what, we also always need to step back to think about the why. Like, we talked about this in one of the other coffee clubs. We think that so-called soft skills can be more important than technical skills. So for me, like, one of the things I'm thinking is, do I need to learn the latest version of Java, or do I perhaps need to be thinking about maybe iterating over how the team works so that we can ask the business better questions about what they're trying to achieve, and therefore can maybe I force records into production code because the business needs it. Like, so the what and the how are kind of linked, and there's a lot to explore there.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, because that is a lot of it is filtering, because you will, if you want to learn 100 technologies, you can spend the entire workday, or, you can spend all your time learning about all the new technologies out there. And it's really important to filter, and you filter on the why. And I've found that I've used the to figure out the what. I feel like I've figured out that the best way I keep up with different stuff is actually social media. So Twitter has really helped me figure out what is other developers doing out there to that they're solving the problems with. So, for example, if I'm seeing a lot of people talking about a certain feature or a certain framework over and over again, there's probably a reason that they're talking about it. And sometimes the reason isn't relevant to me. Like, I know there was a lot of talk about Web3 last week, and I just kept seeing it over and over again. And to me, it's like, it's interesting. I kind of looked into it a little bit to just understand what it is. But then after I understood what it was, I was like, you know what? I don't really need to learn more about it. If it comes up again in my career, maybe I'll go back and look at it. But at least I was aware that a lot of people are using or are looking into Web3. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't on, your social media of choice. It doesn't have to be Twitter. It could be, LinkedIn or, Reddit or whatever you're using, just to keep up with other people, stay connected with other developers, instead of being behind the desk and just coding all day, every day, which that was me at the beginning of my career. I would just, the company told me to do something, I just did it. Do something, did it. And my mindset was a lot smaller, and I didn't see what everyone else is doing. And I realized that, so I needed to branch out a little bit more. And that has been very helpful for figuring out trends, what are other people are doing, and staying in touch with other people as well. So yeah, definitely echo Trisha's point of step back after you figure out the what and ask yourself why you need to look into it.
Yeah, I want to yes and that, especially your point around Twitter, because I think we're really fortunate in the Java community. So I've certainly found this in the last year alone, the sheer amount of community created content that is out there for anything. It really is anything. There's somebody's done a blog on it or a video on it or got anything. There is so much content out there. A lot of it is, granted, knowing what to search for, which once I've figured that out, I normally find what I want quite quickly, but that's definitely what takes me the longest, is working out exactly what my problem is and what I need. But there is such a wealth of content out there. So the where is really important, because much like Dalia was saying, I used to not really expand my horizons. And ever since I've started doing that and looking at content that people are creating, Twitter and other platforms, I have learned so much. I do want to caveat that with, I think we're very fortunate as developer advocates in that we have time to do more of that, and I do recognise that not all developers have that privilege. So I think there's a very fine balance there for most of us.
I want to give Mala an opportunity to talk, but I wanted to really follow up on that specific point. I'm so sorry, because yes, damn, now I've forgotten what I was going to say. Yes, as developer advocates, we are in a position of privilege because we do have time, and in fact, it's part of our job to look for new technologies, try them out, and ideally teach them to other people. But also, I think it also gives us a much bigger problem than most normal people have, because like if you're doing your day job, you can limit yourself in a good way. You can filter down to the stuff you really care about. Whereas we're like, should we care about, for example, Hibernate, right? I never used Hibernate as a professional developer. And then I started doing this job. I'm like, should I actually learn Hibernate now so that I can teach it to someone? Then Dalia came along and she taught it to people, so I didn't have to worry about that. But that also leads me a little bit onto what I really wanted to say here, which is that the filtering and the saying no to stuff and the adoption curve, talking about the noise on Twitter. Sometimes it really is enough just to be like, okay, people are chattering about this thing. That seems to be a thing. I will wait until it just becomes inevitable that I absolutely must learn about this. Docker is an example of that for me, because like for 6 years, everyone's going Docker, Docker, Docker. And I'm like, whatever, I just can't. And this year I'm like, it is now unavoidable. And it might seem like I'm late to the Docker party, but it's not, because I'm just in time to learn Docker for me, for the problems I'm trying to solve. And by now, there's so many resources for learning Java, especially Dalia's excellent videos, that it takes me a lot less time to get up to speed on what's happening with Docker if I just wait until it's the right time. Mala, I want you to say something now.
So I want to talk about, of course, as everyone of us are aware, that we cannot just hide behind our laptops, because we get information from so many different social media, from our friends, colleagues. So we cannot just escape this thing. Of course, our brain also filters a lot of things. It tells us what it is that it is important right now, because we don't really go and look up when we read, let's say, an article title which says about 5 things that you need to know how to create the nuclear reactor in a better way, because we know we don't need that. So as Dalia mentioned, the what part is also related to why we want to know about things. Because when I am looking at what to learn about, or what are the things that I need to stay ahead of curve, I also look at the breadth versus depth. I just need to know about certain things that they are capable of doing things, so that when I need to dig deeper, I know what to reach out to, and then I can quickly get up to speed. So I don't have the fear of FOMO then, because I know there are some basics I can apply to a whole set of technologies. If I'm talking about databases, I could apply that to XYZ framework, technologies, companies, and I'm good with that. And I also like to time box how much time I want to invest, because as Trisha mentioned, as developer advocate, we also have the freedom to choose what we want to focus our energy on. It might look like, yes, we have a lot of privilege, but with that also comes a lot of confusion. Where should we focus our energies on? So that's also difficult. So I like to time box whether I want to learn about a particular thing and how much time do I want to devote about that. And the other thing that really helps me, apart from looking into areas which are specifically about technology, I also like to read or work with something which requires a completely different skill set, let's say some art and craft, because what I learned there, I get to apply in how I teach people, or how I, let's say, observe them working with some issues which I can solve. And it's amazing how that matches. So working with a different skill set, that would also really help, even though that would not, it might seem that doesn't really applies to your skill set or working with your everyday project.
Oh, it definitely applies, Mala. Thank you. The number of times I've been practically screaming at code, and I've forced myself to walk away, and I've wished I'd done it a lot earlier than when I actually did it. So, Dalia.
I want to echo Mala's point on the depth and versus breadth, because that is so important. A lot of times I just want to know what problem this technology solves, and it'll determine how much depth I want to do. So like if that problem I'm seeing a lot in my workspace or whatever, that means, okay, it's worth investing into. If it's not a problem I'm seeing a lot of, then it's not worth going, too much in depth with it. So at least understanding kind of like the surface level, and then figuring out if you want to really dig deep would be a really good way to figure out the what.
Yeah, thanks, Dalia, 100%. Just before we move on to the exciting, chunky how section, I do want to pick up on one of the comments in the chat about whenever they open LinkedIn, they see people posting that they did this and that, and perhaps feeling that, you know, a little demotivated as a result. And I really hope that if you take anything away from this chat, it's that's how we all feel. Honestly, when we're looking at that stuff, because you can't possibly know everything, nor should you know everything. It's not possible. And the whole breadth versus depth, and understanding why you want to focus on that thing, where and what you're going to look at, and then onto the how. I really hope that that's something that you take away from this, because we share the feeling. Okay, so we've talked about the why, we've talked about the what, and the where. Well, not the what and the where. Yes, the what and the where. I want to move on to the how, and I kind of called, or I name-checked Mala on this earlier, because Mala has a very hard, let's start with hard job, and a very interesting job in that we certainly in the team and so much of the wider Java community learn from the content that Mala creates. So in the same way that when I'm out there searching for stuff of how to do X, Y, and Z for this particular Java problem that I want to solve, Mala is the person reading the JEPs, understanding what's coming in the next Java release, and not just that, then parsing it and putting it into examples that are relatable for us developers. And that's, I'm very, very grateful to her that she does that, because examples about sealed classes with plants just make me super happy. So Mala, I want to hand over to you to chat through kind of some of how do you do that? Just how do you do that?
So Helen, first of all, thank you so much for your kind words. I'm really glad to know that the plants example in the sealed classes is really helping to kind of know about the concept and to remember about them, because that's the reason why I use those examples. So depending on the work that I'm doing, so now let me talk specifically about the videos that I have, the videos and the blogs that I have for each new Java release, and how it works with IntelliJ IDEA. Because I am looking at a particular output, I look I take a step back and then I look for resources which makes sense to me. Of course, I do not miss any podcast, any talk from Ryan Getz, because he's the person who is leading the Java language. And also I read the JEPs in depth. Also, I go through the Java language specification just to make sure that I do not miss any terminology, because if you get things wrong in the first place, that goes down in the history, and then you could be blamed for people not doing things in the right manner. So I do take a look at a lot of other contents, like from the speakers and the bloggers that I really appreciate, like speakers like Venkat or Nikolai. I know their content is really in depth, and they do take a lot of care about their own content. So these I try to get information from multiple places which I know have fared well in the past, and then I try to create my own content. Of course, when I'm talking about creating videos for or the blog post for a new version and how it works with IntelliJ IDEA, I also talk with the IntelliJ IDEA team. What is it that they're thinking about? How and why should a developer be adopting those new features, and how they can do it easily in IntelliJ IDEA? So there is a lot of whys and hows and what's and where which are coming together, because even though we might think of these questions as separate, they really converge to one piece that we try to create, and then we have to answer a lot of questions. And of course, so this is only about the content that I just mentioned. Depending on other content, I might take a completely different approach.
That's incredible. I guess filtering is a huge part of your role on the run up to a Java release, and do you actually start that process as soon as, so Java 17 has just been released, are you already looking to Java 18 already?
Yes, because I was talking about pattern matching, and a part of it is already planned for the next release. The JEP doesn't mention the Java version, but we are hoping that the deconstructions for arrays and records would be as a preview feature in Java 18. So I try to keep a whole tab on what's coming in the new versions of Java as soon as the JEPs are out there.
Wow, whole new level of respect.
I can add to that, because after Mala does all that work, when I'm learning something, I just go read her blog. So I take advantage of all the work she's already done, because by the time I'm ready to learn about the new features, other already done the work, the research, and read the JEPs and all that stuff, and I realize I just kind of need their findings. So, when I was getting ready to do the Java 17 stuff, Mala had already written the blog about it. So I just went through and read Mala's blog, which was extremely helpful. But I do want to expand on beyond Java, because with Java 17, it starts with, like, if the technology is really new or the release is really new, you'll see limited resources because people are not talking about it yet. So that for me, when I'm looking at something super new, I just kind of see what I can get online and find folks that are able to explain things well and all that stuff. But it's kind of limited. But when I'm looking at something like, DevOpsy, like Docker or Kubernetes, when I went through figuring out how I'm going to learn about it, I tapped into my learning style. And I've learned that I learn better with videos. And I have like favorite creators that I go to that really work well, because I realize that I go back to my college days where there is a lecture and someone is teaching me something, and this really helps me learn something. So I know someone in the chat even mentioned Tech Nana, and she's been really helpful. And whenever I see a video with her, I watch it because I know she can explain it the way I can understand it, and other creators like that. So for me, if it's an established technology that has a lot of resources, I tend to move towards more my learning style, which is videos. I find folks that really speak to me and can can explain a concept where I can understand it. I bring my notebook with me. I like to write things down, things like that. So a lot of times you want to ask yourself, what's your learning style? And that's a question I want to ask the audience is, have you thought about what your learning style is? Do you learn better with videos or blogs or live coding and all that stuff? That's another one that I know people have. And I recommend focusing on, okay, what's the best way to learn this? Work smarter, not harder. Because if you learn better with videos, then you can go to videos. If blogs, then you go to blogs. And then it doesn't take you as long to go and learn that. So that's kind of my how. I'd love to hear more from y'all, especially Helen, because Helen, you've learned a ton and it's extremely impressive from different sources even.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about my own learning style in the last year. As you know, you and I have discussed in the past, Dalia, I don't do as well with videos. I'm not as they just don't appeal to me as much. That said, there's still some stuff that I do like videos for, especially if I can watch them on slightly faster than one speed. But blogs for me are what I enjoy doing, but actually just doing it, trying it. I'm very quick to jump in and try something out because that's how I learn. I learn by doing. But it really does depend. There's so many, and it's not a case of putting people in boxes as well. It's not just a case of some people might like videos, some people like blogs, some people like code cutters. It depends on a huge range of different variables. And some days you might just want to sit on the sofa and watch a video. That might be your thing. It might just be a horrible day outside and you just want to sit and watch a video and chill. So it really does depend on a huge range of factors.
I want to add to that because sometimes I'm doing it and I'm not getting anything from it. I stop and I'm like, all right, let me try something else. And I've seen you do that a lot with you know, if it's
jump around.
And I think that's really, really nice because then you're not fully committed. If it's not working for you and if I'm halfway through a video and I'm not following the speaker much and it's not doing it for me, I go and find someone else or I find a blog. So exploring that I think has been really helpful.
Yep, I do that a lot. Somebody's mentioned talking about JetBrains Academy as well, and I do that with JetBrains Academy. I'll learn something there, and then I'll be like, right, do I know everything that I want to / need to know about this particular topic? I'll go and have a quick Google, read a couple of blogs. Do I understand the blogs? Have I learned what I needed to learn? Have I learned anything additional from the blogs? Do the blogs disagree? You know, I jump around and I will Google until my heart's content, until I'm happy that I know enough about the subject, and then I'll start playing with code, and then I will try and walk away and go and do something crafty, as to Mala's earlier point, which is still not a strength of mine, but I am working on it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions in the chat was, what's the balance between time spent on books and actually coding or hands-on? And of course the answer that the three of you have just given is that it depends. It depends on you, it depends on the topic you're learning, it depends on what mood you're in right now. It depends a lot on things like the books. I spent a lot of time with actual physical books. They're actually mostly behind me. When I was learning Java 8, I bought books and I really wanted to understand lambda expressions and streams because I really wanted to know that like inside out. So I did a lot of reading from books because there were lots of great books on it. And when Java 9, I was doing some content on Java 9 before Java 9 was released. So I didn't have that luxury because no one had written any books yet. And that was literally like, download the latest version of Java 9, look through some of the mailing lists, look through like various half-baked blogs from things which may or may not have been released, be hands-on, play with it, see what it feels like, and have a feel for, does this seem useful, or you know, is it do I not understand it? And then I would sometimes put stuff on Twitter and sort of say, I don't really get this. And I was lucky enough that some of the Oracle folks were following me and say, oh right, there's a bug in JShell or something, like, oh great, I found a bug. So yeah, it depends a lot on what you're learning. You can try all these different learning styles and experiment with that. And if something's not working for you, absolutely go to something else, try a different medium, or try learning a different thing. Maybe it's just not your sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's all really valid. It's reminding me of something else, and something that certainly I want to discuss is sometimes, and I've definitely been in this situation, and I think you probably have all been in this situation as well as the audience, you get 30 minutes into a video, or you get 20 minutes down a blog, and you're like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand the example. This isn't working for me. And that can be, or at least what I've discovered is that can be for a huge variety of reasons. Like you might not, the learning style might not work for you. We're all different, thankfully. So, pick a different blog, pick a different video. I think the most successful strategy when you find yourself in this scenario is to walk away for a bit and go and do something else and come back to it. That's certainly what I'm trying to do. But I think it's very easy, or at least I find it very easy to go down a bit of a rabbit hole. And I blame myself. I think if I don't understand this blog, it's me. I don't get it. I'm what's wrong with me? Why don't I understand this? And then I'll go and watch a video, and then I'll get even more frustrated because I still don't understand it. Because by that point, there's a whole chemical thing going on that I'm stupid and I can't do this and I don't understand this. So, do any of you have any tips for dealing with that?
Yes. So I spent 2 weeks trying to understand Docker. All I wanted to do was put together an introduction to Docker video. Mala knows this because this is before Helen and Dalia joined us. This is 2 years ago. And it was suggested to us that maybe it would be good to have a Docker video. And I'm like, I don't know Docker, but I do know how to learn things. I pick stuff up quickly. And so I spent literally 2 weeks just working on Docker. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I've read all of these things, and a lot of them are driven from the command line. And I know that I'm not a command line sort of person. I didn't understand Git until I could see it inside IntelliJ IDEA. So when they're telling me command line stuff and then giving me words like containers and images and stuff, but like not giving me solid examples of, if you have a Java application and the thing that you want to do is run this kind of test or deploy it over here, like that's what I need. I need context. I need you to tell me what problem this thing solves, when I might want to use it. Or if you tell me this is how you start a Docker container, I'm like, yes, I can type that in, but I haven't learned anything. What's a Docker container? What do I want it for? When would I use it? How do I apply it? How does it solve my problems that I have? And then Dalia came along and I said, do a Docker video.
I want to add to that and tie into what Helen was asking, because when I was learning about it, to begin with, I was getting confused and I was like, I still don't understand this. But my thought was, well, I don't think it's me. Like, it's more of like, it seems like every time I ask someone, they say, I don't understand it either. So I a lot of times I go and ask other people. I think that's also a really good tip, is I go to someone else on the team. Like I go to Helen or Trisha or Mala or someone in the community or whoever and tell them, hey, do you understand this? And if they kind of seem like iffy, that means it's probably not me. Or maybe it's the resources or whatever it is. And for me, I got excited because I was like, no one is explaining this in a way that really makes sense to a Java developer, and went off and spent months creating resources. So I kind of turned it around into a positive. But a lot of times I remind myself, if I'm having problems with it, there's probably someone else having issues with it. And if they're not, I want to talk to them about it and just spend maybe 30 minutes and ask them some questions and dig deep on that. So taking advantage of your team and your resources and the people in the community and having a one-on-one, I feel like that really has helped me, having someone to just sit down and ask questions to and discuss a topic and all that stuff has been so helpful. And I'm always grateful for anyone that is willing to do that. And I try to do the same.
I think as you get, as you become more experienced with things, when you start out as a programmer or start out as anything, you're filled with doubt, and all you can see is the scenarios of all the stuff you don't know anything about, right? And everything is really intimidating. I think as you get more experienced, as you've learned more things, Dalia, to your point, like with Docker, I just thought, I haven't seen a use case for it. I haven't worked in an environment where it works. I haven't read any tutorials that speak to me. I'm not going to say good tutorials, because there were great tutorials. They just didn't speak to me. I know it's not me. I know I'm not stupid. It's just, it's not my thing right now. I'm not, and it's not my failure. It's not anyone's failure. It's just like, it's not my thing right now. There's so many other things to be doing right now. I know that I know how to learn stuff. My job has been, ever since I've been a baby developer, my job is to learn stuff and pick stuff up. And don't don't kick yourself if there's something you just don't get, if there's something you just don't understand. It's almost definitely not you. This is one of the reasons why what I love about this team is that we work really, really hard to try and create content that developers kind of get. It's like, we know it's hard. We know that people struggle with things that other people seem to find easy. And it's really gratifying to try and create that content, like where you're like, if only I'd had this when I was learning this. And it's fun to do that, and to try not to make people feel stupid. It's fine. Of course you don't know this thing. It's absolutely fine. Let me walk you through it, or let me at least brain dump some of the stuff that helped me. Maybe it will help someone.
Yep, great point. Mala, you're on mute, but over to you.
That's always the case. This didn't had to happen today, right? So I want to add a point to we not being able to understand something, or probably the other content having a bug, because a lot of time we think it's our fault that probably we are not getting the things, or the things are not working on our machines. No, we're not using Docker, but it's just that things are not working. Because when I was working on Java 17, I specifically was working on switch expressions, and one of the examples in the JEP was not working, and I pinged Nikolai and I mentioned that this is not working. I tried all the combinations. So what is it? Is it just me, or that's not working? And then the final result was that there was a bug, and a bug was raised, a report was filed, and then it was like, no, it was not just me. There was a bug somewhere. So it could be your learning style, but there could also be something which is not working on the other side. So anyone who's feeling that they're not getting it, please do raise your voice.
And I want to add to that, because a lot of times if you're not getting it, or something is off there, and like Mala went off and actually did an action that resulted in someone else being helped because they're not going to run into that bug anymore. Similarly, if you're not getting it and you got it after so much work, you could take that opportunity to write a blog or share something along with the community. So if someone else went through that, they can find your content helpful. And that is definitely a good way to grow your career and be more visible and all that stuff. A lot of times developers say, like, I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what value I provide, all this stuff. Well, if you're learning things while you're doing this exploratory stuff, and you share that, that's really valuable for someone else that might struggle with the same thing you're struggling with. It's similar to Stack Overflow, but on a larger scale. So I definitely encourage using that as maybe a topic to talk about something or contribute to the community.
I really like that point, because obviously that's how a lot of us end up being developer advocates. We kind of decided to start sharing stuff that we found interesting. But I think it also answers it leads into answering one of the other questions we had earlier on about how to get real world experience. Now, it is difficult. The bootstrapping problem is a serious thing. Like, if you are not working on, let's say you're not working on a Spring application, you're working on a completely different framework. How do you get industry experience of working on a Spring application when you're not working on a Spring application? Well, it is a bit tricky, but there are ways to chip away at that. And one of those is exactly what you were saying, Dalia. Like, if I have a pet project, I can put it on GitHub, but even better than that, I can do a blog about like what I learned when I was doing it, or what I think might be missing compared to an enterprise project. Let's say I'm using a different framework in the enterprise I work for, and I work on a pet Spring project. I could do a comparison between my tiny Hello World Spring application and my big enterprise application and see, right, I don't really understand where security fits in here, or maybe what I'm interested in is how I could scale this in an enterprise application, that kind of thing. So if you're writing, you can write stuff, or you do videos, of course, because Dalia, you're more of a video person and I'm more of a writey person, but you can do like little videos or Twitch streaming or even putting comments in your GitHub repository or whatever. It doesn't matter what the medium is. Share some of your journey of how you learned that, and that adds to your portfolio. Now, as developers, of course, you're going to be submitting a CV or resume when you are trying to apply for a new job. But one of the things that really makes you stand out is if you have something other than your CV or resume, like a GitHub profile, like a Stack Overflow profile, like a blog, even if your blog's only got 3 or 4 blog posts on it, you've got 3 or 4 more blog posts than the other person who's also applying for that job. So you can use your learning experience and even your struggles, even the pain you've had, to actually use that to showcase why you're the right person to hire into another job that uses those sorts of technologies.
Great. Thank you. We have 10 minutes left. I just want to pick up on a couple of questions from the audience. First one, I'd like to know, how do you organize or set goals to stay ahead of your curve, since there's many sources of information, social media, blogs, videos, etc., etc. My response to that is to go back to Mala's point about breadth versus depth. I think when you're first learning something, it's, at least I find it helpful. You might not, but I find it helpful to go wide, to go broad, get a rough understanding, because the one thing I find that teaches me is it teaches me the terminology. It teaches me what to look for, and if I understand the search terms, I can then better find the information that I want in the format that I want it in. So I can better find a blog or a video or a code cutter. So I tend to go broad and then I go deep. But everybody is different, or your learning style is different. That's just my advice. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that question that they want to share?
I do, but I'm going to wait for the others to offer it first. I have a talk about this. I'm going to paste it in the. Oh no, I've pasted it through the IntelliJ IDEA thing. But anyway, I should have put that on my. Anyway, in the chat, I've just posted a thing about a link to a talk I've got called Becoming a Fully Buzzword Compliant Developer, and it talks a little bit about the broad versus the deep. So how do you get an idea of the overall industry as it is? Like, that's really, really shallow. Like, literally, what are the words that you're seeing on Twitter? How do I see the things which impact my kind of area? Let's say the JVM. Let's narrow it down a little bit to the JVM, maybe the frameworks, and you're going to go a little bit deeper on that, like, rather than just the framework names, like what problems do these solve? But still, you're talking about, like, the mechanisms I use for this is Twitter, newsletters. When I was running Annotated Monthly was amazing, because it kind of like forced me to read lots of other newsletters and get a feel for like all the news items which were coming in. So then you can use those to get a feel, a little bit more depth about what's happening in your area. And then maybe you might pick one technology or a process or a theme to find out a little bit more about. And then once you pick that, then you're going to go a bit deeper. Then you're going to start maybe watching some talks. Maybe you'll buy a book rather than just reading a blog post. Then, you're going to play with some code, maybe check some stuff into GitHub. And so that's kind of what you want. You kind of want, like, it's not so much just a T-shape, but this idea of like, you're going to be very, very shallow across a broad range and then gradually deepen into the areas that you want. And you can use different kind of different media for that sort of thing. Like, you can use videos or conferences or books or whatever, but that all kind of falls into, you have to figure out where you want to go and which tools you're going to use to learn that. So I have that in that presentation, so I don't need to spend 45 minutes talking about it right now.
That's good, because we've only got 7 left. Another question from the community. I'd like to ask how you choose the source for learning between the great amount of information on the internet. Any tips for that one? Mala?
Yes, so I have a lot of tips, and this is what I have learned the hard way. So when I talk about, let's say, Java, so I would look for the authority on that topic. So I would follow handle of Oracle. I would like to see other, like I mentioned, Brian Gates and other people who are working on the technology. So I get the whys together with hows, because it's important for me to understand why a particular feature was added to Java, not just the syntax and how it works with the other features. The other thing is about, because I see this question as kind of relevant to everyone and more to people who are just starting with their careers. What handles should I follow, or where should I look if I do not know where should I look for them? So how do we learn to learn? So my go-to place has been a Java user group, because I have been working with Java user groups for quite a long time. And then I get to see a lot of people who are probably in the same boat or they are already an authority. And then I get to pick their brain and talk about how do I do things which I don't know. So probably we can talk about the goal that I want to reach to, and then kind of take a step back and then talk about the resources. So my tips would be to follow the people who you think are the authority on that framework, language, and then do associate yourself with a Java user group. That really, really helps to learn a lot of things that you might not know.
Yeah, I can't believe we've got this far into this particular topic and not mentioned Java user groups. Can't say anything bad. They are amazing, and if you're not already part of one or more, you should definitely consider that. Okay, we have got a few minutes left. There is one more question that I had, and it's how do you focus, or how do you pick where to focus? And we've kind of talked about this. We've talked about some things that are on the periphery of it. But for example, given us in the audience today, Maven or Gradle? How do you choose? How do you opt for a technology if you don't necessarily have a driver at this point, but you're moving into the professional Java developer, and you're probably going to need to use both unless you want to get the jump on one of them? How do you choose?
So I have an opinion. I like the Maven versus Gradle one because they're more or less evenly used. So, I mean, you could, of course, check out like things like that. JetBrains has a JVM ecosystem report. So you could, for example, see from that ecosystem report which version of Java are most people using, or which framework are most people using, or are more people using Maven or Gradle? And that can help. Some of those numbers can help guide you. There are also some stats out there on which are the sort of buzzwords people are asking for when they're posting job specs. So that's where some of these top 10 skills that Java developers need to know type posts come from. So that's one thing. But what I think is really interesting is that the Java community is so huge, the ecosystem is so huge, that let's say you pick something which is not quite as popular, or let's go with the Maven versus Gradle. Like, Maven is marginally more popular than Gradle. But in a community as huge as Java, that means like thousands, hundreds of thousands of applications are still using Gradle. So you look at Maven, you look at Gradle, and you say, do I want to use XML, or do I want to use a groovy DSL? Well, I think maybe I'll have a tiny play with both, but maybe I'll just pick the one that feels nicest for me. And so here's the key point, I think, that I really want to pass on when it comes to staying ahead of the curve and figuring out what to learn and how to learn it. It's really important that you want to do this thing, or you want to use this thing. So for example, if so I actually changed jobs once to use a new it was a financial tool. It was written in Java, but it wasn't about coding in Java. It was actually like maintaining this particular tool. And I moved into it because I wanted to get into business analysis instead of coding. I wanted to get into finance because that's where like all the jobs are in the London city. And I just kind of, and it was still in the Java world, and I thought it was kind of like interesting, and also it was really highly paid. I did it for 3 months, and I absolutely hated it because it was just I wasn't coding, so that was a bit of a downside. But B, this particular tool, it just wasn't fun. It just didn't float my boat. It wasn't really my thing. And I kept thinking, but I could get this many pounds per hour in order to be a contractor for this. And I'm like, and turn up to work every day and have to work with this thing that I don't want to work with. So ultimately, there's so much choice out there, especially in the JVM world. Pick something that works for you, because you're going to have to work with it every day.
I want to like plus 100 that there might be like so many technologies out there, and it's okay to pick based on interest or what you're passionate about. Like when I picked Docker, it was because I already wanted to learn about Docker. If there's other technologies that are really popular, but I just don't have any interest in learning about it. And I don't want to be a subject matter expert because I just don't like working on it. So when you're asking yourself why, ask yourself, would I even enjoy working on this? And sometimes you have to play with it a little bit to figure out, would you enjoy it? But if you don't enjoy it, it's okay to move on. There's so much out there that you don't have to limit yourself to something that you really don't enjoy. I think that's the number one advice. And I think it's nice that we're kind of wrapping it up, because ask yourself what you want to work on, and if you want to build the skills there, and if you're interested.
That's great. Thank you. I was going to ask you all for one piece of advice to wrap up. So Trisha, Dalia, thank you. Mala, what advice would you like to give today?
I would like to mention something which I did not mention yet. Write a Java certification, because even though it would not help you to be on the bleeding edge, but it would surely help you to know the technology inside out, and that really helps.
Great, thank you. Advice from myself, I would just say be kind to yourself. Give yourself the time and the space, and recognize that learning is active. You can't just watch a video or read a blog and expect it to, at least I can't, expect it to magically sink in. It's an active process, and you need the bandwidth and the brain space to do that. I would also add Mala's videos for each new Java release are amazing videos and blogs. Thank you, Mala. So if you're not familiar with those, definitely go watch them, because Java 17 is here and Java 18 is coming. I'm going to hand over to Dalia to tell you about our next episode 3, not 4, of the Coffee Club before we go. Dalia.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. So our next episode is on October 13th, and it's about migrating to Java 17. So we want to talk about pain points and all that stuff. It's not going to be as much new features as what do you expect your applications to do, what's going to break, what's happening in that area. And I'm really looking forward to that, because we're going to have a guest speaker from the IntelliJ IDEA team, and he's going to tell us about their experiences moving to Java 17 as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's October 13th during the same time slot. So I'd love to have folks join us for that.
Great, thank you. And look, thank you to you, community, for tuning in today, and thank you for your questions. It's been great to have a little bit of interaction with you. Best we can do in this current situation. Thank you, Mala, Trisha, Dalia, for being here. Mala, I know it's late there. Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks all for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.